All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 13 re-edition of the standards meeting. We moved from last week to this week due to a schedule conflict, and stoked to see this worked out for everybody from a schedule perspective. Announcements, as usual, we start with, there were a couple from earlier. Robin, do you want to share?
Couple earlier to share.
The LIFT scholarship.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Today, the Linux Foundation is offering scholarships for training and certification across the whole catalog of content. But for us, it also applies to our Node.js training and certification. So that's pretty cool. So if you're interested in that, go check it out. We did a blog and tweeted from OpenJS as well.
Other quick announcements. Obviously, we are the standards meeting, so it's usually I'm like, oh, there's a program committee meeting on Thursday for OpenJS World. Kind of moving into the topics of like execution for breakouts and like how we want to handle Slack and Q&A and stuff with the speakers, because we should be we've sent out announcements to the people we selected. So that'll all be live on the website here in a week or so. So do come to that if you're interested. The other thing that I shared in Slack this morning, which is cool, the W3C has and this is obviously very relevant to our interests, the W3C has a new spec editor community group that they have opened. I am super jazzed. It's chaired by Marcos Caceros, who's the author of Respec and Bike Shed, which are two awesome spec editing tools. And the focus of this community group is on like tutorials and mentorship and just things that you might need or benefit from in order to be a great spec editor. So I think, wow, that's awesome. That's certainly something that I think we want to support. And so I encourage y'all, if you're interested, to go join that community group. It's open to anybody too. So there's that. And there's also a new charter out for the web editor working groups, if you're interested in like document or text editing or anything like that on the web. The W3C has this new working group charter out as well. Yeah, that is that. What was there any? There hasn't been a TC39 meeting since the beginning of March, so we're good on that front. Unless I'm missing any. Richard, am I missing one? No, cool. Cool. And I also want to welcome Hemant here from TC39, hello, who writes all of the awesome like recaps of TC39 meetings, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
So, okay, any other announcements? All right, cool. Moving then into our topics for today. First up, we have issue 132 on our repository, which is joint statement on open source and standards with the W3C. So if you'll recall, we talked about this, as part of a like further alignment with the W3C. What are some things we can be doing to help learn from that community and to help support that community and vice versa. And one of the things that we thought would be great would be to sort of express more of our intent. And so that's something that Robin is leading and hopes to kind of have something to share or state more publicly. But she wants our feedback and our input on this. So take it away, Robin.
Yeah, hoping to have more of a working session. And I think if we have a joint statement, it could be something that we start with W3C, and then as we get something we like and that's harmonized, we could take it to some other standards groups as well, and talk about sort of our shared principles and a pledge at our conference on June 2nd. So that is sort of around the corner. Some things that I think that we all who work in standards and open source may be super obvious, may not be obvious to the outside world who aren't tracking all the great work happening in the community. So thinking if we could have a little bit of a brainstorm working session on some sort of key shared principles that we have between open source and open standards and how they work better together and how the communities overlap and how we can grow sort of that next kind of almost like the pipeline and next generation of people working in that space. Does that make sense? Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to join that working session, but also we could start to collaborate on a document or something if that was of interest.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like I said, I don't know if it makes sense to have a separate working session to start brainstorming some themes now. If we see any sort of obvious areas, let me see.
I think one of the obvious areas is in like the creating inclusive communities like that. Like there's a lot to be shared and learned from, and we already kind of are seeing spaces where the communities are getting together and workshopping things. There's also like the educational thread of like making sure people understand the value of open source and the value of standards, and so it seems like those are easy wins, if you will.
Yeah. That's what I started out, I've just been sort of brainstorming on my own as well. I had sort of, the whole shared principles around privacy, equality, human rights in the web. I think those are pretty strong as well.
Also probably diving more into details on how you should read the spec in itself, which is an art per se. So how will you pick up a particular section, try to understand what's happening, and reading specs and also like contributing to specs are like interesting parts.
Yeah. I think I had, I was sort of, I actually had simplifying in my sort of my own personal brainstorm, which I think, again, it's when Jory talked about the educating piece too, and with what you were talking about. Yeah. So how to read, how to understand. What was that third piece you mentioned?
How do you contribute back to spec?
How do you contribute back? Mm-hmm.
So I'm running this video cast called Read Spec with Us, where we pick up parts of the spec and try to read it and give some code examples and then try to iterate through the spec again. That's just an effort to start. We have picked up the ECMAScript specification.
Okay.
Do you have
Great.
a link to that? I'd love to put it in our bucket for this upcoming issue, which I am super glad you're here for.
Yeah, sure. I'm just typing it in the chat area. It's readspec.us. So, yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I think there's one shared principle that maybe some don't understand that the standards bodies are working toward is agility. I know it's been sort of a long-standing effort, right, in a variety of ways. I don't know how we can make that a little more real or add anything concrete around that.
Some of the interesting pieces I've observed is, I think I saw it in one of the node words where they made the GitHub projects open, where they had all the milestones and roadmap out in the public, where people could, comment on the issues, and which kind of helped them to prioritize what features that folks are looking for. And the project board and the milestone, the roadmap, everything was open, and folks could see it, and they got a better idea on where the project is heading next. And thereby they were able to contribute more meaningfully on what they felt the problem was and that helped to prioritize the solutions. So.
Great. That's great.
Other things we would want to highlight, I mean, I guess in terms of, and obviously we're this as a shaping some of these ideas into a statement means necessarily that it's going to be kind of high level. But I think maybe there's other like themes we could speak to, and let me just ask that. I mean, thematically, when y'all think about open source and open standards, going together, like Robin says, motherhood and apple pie, or two sides of the coin, or peanut butter and jelly, or whatever. What are some of those things that y'all think of?
Maybe the recognition that standards can be derived from open source projects, or a combination of both, that there's no there's no right way or wrong way when an industry comes together.
And that I think that the stakeholders in the standards process include not just the industry stakeholders, or not just corporate entities within industry.
Yeah, Mike, there's an impact component that I think historically de jure standardization activities have to, bring in, which, the public policy angle and all of that stuff, which doesn't often, but in open source, we're increasingly concerned about what is the social impact of our technology. I'm not sure if that's where you were going exactly, but that's where, that's what you inspired me to say.
I agree wholeheartedly.
And I think also, like, to your point and Robin's point, like, it is often the case that a standardization activity inspires an open source project, and an open source project, like they tumble downhill together. Maybe don't put that in the quote, but.
Yeah.
One aspect of standards work that I've ended up needing to learn by practice and experience is that I'm coming into standards work from an interesting and non sort of default point of view, which is from open source. Most of the people participating are industry in one way or another, and are effectively being paid to participate, and they're representing more or less some amount of corporate interest. And I don't know what really is the lesson to take away from the experience, but it took me a while to realize that some people are more equal than other people, and that in order to really fit in and to make a good positive effort in standards work, you kind of need to realize who you are in the position and the background you're coming from in order to get your points and thoughts across.
Absolutely, and in contrast to that, if we can look into the TC39 community per se, we also have this concept of invited experts, right? So it need not be that they are part of the paid members group for the TC39 itself, the ECMA script, the foundation, but rather they can be like an invited expert, given that they had a good proposal to present and they have champions for it. They could be invited to the standard body in the meetings, and they could be part of the presentation even though they are not part of the paid members clan.
Good, yeah.
I mean, that's effectively the position I've almost always had in standards work.
And I also kind of wonder, I'd have to kind of go do some like historical digging. But to what extent open source, actually, I think probably answers a lot, because my first recollection of invited experts at W3, or not W3C, at TC39 was from jQuery. I think that that's a way that the open source community has influenced standardization activities for the better, by helping them to open up doors to invited experts who aren't necessarily backed by megacorp.inc, which is.
Do you think it's more neutrality in open source project? Not always. Maybe coming from our kind of multi-stakeholder foundation projects, but.
That's a great and interesting question. I think standardization people would say absolutely not, that they have way more neutrality because of the formality of their
process.
Yeah, process. And they would probably fight you tooth and nail on that.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining. We're brainstorming the sort of key principles around, shared principles around open source and open standards for our W3C, OpenJS, plus others, perhaps.
Right. Yeah, sorry, I'm late. Lost track of time. What is there a draft I could look at to see what I've missed?
I will take the action to draft the draft. We're kind of on a brainstorming now. We kind of all have our,
Was there any points you agreed on so far? Or?
I think it's been just sort of sharing. We talked about inclusivity, kind of that educational piece, and what bringing value and bringing new people along, sharing, educating more folks on how to read and understand a spec and how to contribute back. We talked some about agility. We talked about there's no one right way to do it. We talked about the social impact of our technology. We've talked about sort of being sort of that invited expert, like Emily often and others are sort of these invited experts, and maybe that's where a lot of the open source folks have contributed back, as opposed to being sort of one of the, where were you talking, the megacorp participants.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I see the link to the doc and the minutes. So
yeah,
proceed. Proceed. Sorry, I'm late.
It would be kind of interesting too to just take that, historically these two things have been influencing each other for a while, and we have evidence of that, and we have this shared, a lot of shared values, both most open source projects and most SDO orgs are going to say we value openness and transparency and vendor neutrality. That's not controversial. So there seems to be a lot of low hanging stuff that we can acknowledge is
vendor neutrality. I love the idea too how related standards or related open source projects can coexist. That people ask us that all the time, right? So.
How about how they complement each other? Have you talked about that?
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that standards are somewhat more approachable by end user types than, code. But you need end users in the conversation as well as implementers in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, from the again going back to the TC39's perspective, we when we get consensus, it's obviously we have the implementers as well as the champions or folks who have proposals who might not be implementers. Sometimes they are too, but that's like the crucial points, right? That because they could foresee a few things that a champion or a guy who's presenting might have missed based on their experience. They would say, hey, this might cause an issue, or the whole idea is not to break web, right? So there are again cases where even after all folks being vigilant, there are a few cases where for some of the proposals did break and it was amended quickly. But the implementers would have insights on things that folks who are non-implementers might not, and they would say, hey, this might be a performance bottleneck, or they might say, hey, this is not really feasible given these constraints and unlikes. And the interesting part that I normally hear out when in public is like the fundamental question that people ask, hey, I have an idea for a proposal, and then how do I go about it? Then they learn that, hey, there is this set of members who are part of the community who get the ability to vote for proposals, and there's this meeting that happens where there's this consensus that is being asked for, and we arrive at a consensus saying that, hey, do we approve for this proposal to go from a stage, say 1 to 2 unlikes? And that feels like a bottleneck for few many, saying that, hey, I do have an idea, but how do I get it in? Should I just go ahead and create an issue, or we do also have a repository which is more like a template for proposal which you can fork and fill in your proposal details. And we do have discussion forums where people would go ahead and post their ideas and tag it as potential proposals. And some champion might say, hey, I like this idea, or most of the time the discussions would be long, saying that, hey, does this idea really work? Or most of them might have appeared in the past, and there might be references saying that, hey, this is why it didn't work. And some champion might agree upon that, hey, I would like to vote for a champion for this idea, and that's when it kind of kicks into the process. So few many folks feel that there's a bottleneck of entering into this era. It's like the channel where I have an idea, but how do I go about it? Like that kind of is kind of laid out in the site where we talk about how the process works and all of it, but it's not clear for everyone. And I think giving more clarity on such things would be useful for a wider set of audience.
Yeah.
I think that actually touches a lot on one of the things that we have identified as a goal for the standards working group this year, is to kind of help with the proposal feedback and discussion. That seems like super connected. And Hemant, you also made me think about the fact that, like, in open source, that is a fairly clear process, like, oh, I'm using this library and I found a bug, or I'd like for it to do this, let me just go open an issue. And it's there. There's one platform, it's GitHub or GitLab. And what is that for? It's a archaeology journey if you're trying to figure out what that means for a standard.
Yeah. Reminds me too, maybe Joe, on like with the Node project, the predictability of the even and odd, how you ship things. And Hemant talked about the roadmap a little bit. So
yeah, it's also a good idea.
More logical path forward, right?
Yep. Predictable. No surprises.
Mm-hmm.
I was about to bring the free and openness in the open source world, but given that all the controversies that's happening, so I would probably skip that topic for now.
So,
Robin, do you think we have enough, like,
we do
thematically to start?
I will, and then I will add it, and then and then you all feel free to jump and add things, move things around, what have you. But I'll send something out in the next day or two. Cool. Thanks.
Sweet.
Cool.
Robin will follow up with a draft. All right. So next topic, issue number 130, This is discussion request as well for resources like readstuckwith.us for helping people begin to onboard and learn about the just this landscape of, as Mike Champion says, standards culture. So just for those who may be tuning in for the first time, we identified this as an opportunity for our standards working group to make a difference, because lots of SDOs may have their own process tutorials or resources, but there's not really a great set of resources that have been curated to help people generically understand like what is this whole landscape all about. And we want to pull some of those things together to help new developers who may be learning about this whole system that affects their livelihood from like a just sort of informational getting started, dipping your toes in the water standpoint, and hopefully find the common grounds across lots of different orgs like ECMA and WhatWG and W3C and so on and so forth. So we have put out a call for everyone's favorite things. Like if somebody were to ask you, where would I go learn? Like, what would you share with them? So that's one part of the brainstorm. And the second part of the brainstorm is, what do we want? Do we want to make a web page for this information? Like, how do we want to present it and contextualize it for people? So Derek and myself have put a couple of things on the issue so far, but this is a time of link sharing, a time of, you know, if you like, yeah, what would we want to, in an ideal world, say, here, new person, is our art gallery of standards crap.
That's a very interesting question. So, if you, for most of the folks out there, like Twitter is kind of the main source where they just follow hash JavaScript or hash TC39 and try to, you know, get the updates. But having one page which is more like a showcase of all these entities would be very interesting. As a part of the TC39 educators group, we had this Twitter handle called Standards in 2 minutes, where we were, the idea was like, or is to have posts which should be like, say 500 words or less, and has bare minimal code examples of a particular proposal which is stage 3 or greater, and would explain the proposal in simple terms and would give an code example or a sample saying that, hey, this is how the proposal makes things better. And then we would go ahead and share it. So the things that this account is tweeting is across the board. It might be some dev2 article. It might be just a gist on GitHub or some personal blog. But if it adheres to this particular construct, we are tweeting it here in this handle. The other PWA that I had built a few years ago was called gsfeatures.in. The idea was on similar lines, where it said, hey, we have ES5, ES6 when it was called. So now it's more like ES 28, 2018, 2019, and 2020 and likes, and saying that, hey, these are the new things that came in as part of ES 2020, for example. And these are how the code snippets for each of these features look like. And this is what is it about. But that's more about educating on the features, but how would one contribute to the proposal itself, or how does the life cycle of a proposal looks like? We do have things like that on the TC39 the main website itself. But I feel taking it as a use case and trying to explain it in a quick, maybe a 5-minute or less of a video, and giving an example would reach a wider set of audience, I presume. As of today, we have a huge page which talks about each of the stage, what is the requirement, and at this particular stage, is it production ready? At this particular stage, we are like seeking for feedback from developers, and at this particular stage, it's under a flag. and it has a lot of details in it. I'm not saying that we don't have enough documentation or content. We already have all of it, which is pretty good. But how do we simplify it and increase the radius of reach is something that we need to think through.
Cool, muted. I think about a lot of like the standards in 2 minutes stuff, a lot of like the TC39, like just education, like your work, you know, is really helping people get the what, and that's kind of what they subscribe on Twitter to the hashtags and stuff. But I think in some cases what is missing is the why or the how, and that's, I think, our group's intent to help answer more, because there's this growing question of like, well, why should we do X, Y, or Z project as a standardization activity? Why not just do it in GitHub? Super legitimate question if you don't understand the purpose of a standardization, you know, activity, or you just haven't been introduced to it. And I think I don't have the book with me right now, but there's Etsy put out this like mega collection of slides and materials that's like walks people through in a very business class fashion of like, you know, here. And I'm like, well, okay, this is great. And it's a developer is not going to read this material. So, you know, I'm kind of like, and it was also very like skewed to the Etsy point of view of the world. So the question is like, well, what's the view of why and how that encompasses TC39's work, that encompasses W3C's work, so that people can go, oh, okay, this makes sense to me, and now I want to get involved in blah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, this team could create a custom initiative, right? For like a one-stop shop. It doesn't have, it could be under OpenJS, or it could be broader than that. So, I mean, totally open to however this group thinks it would be most useful.
And one of the most yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say how to curate that information and share it.
So maybe kind of just sharing a little bit more of like how I think about it. I don't know, it's been 6 years ago at this point. I made this little data viz thing that I just popped in this chat because I was like, wait, what is going on here? Like, how does this all come together? I'm confused. And so what I've been chasing ever since then is sort of like the view that helps make this mess make more sense. And I don't, and like help somebody sort of like find the onboarding path into that morass of stuff.
The visualization is great because the most common question we see on the discussion groups is, hey, this is a good thing, but this is not really part of TC. This is more like a W3C thing. So you should probably go to here and put your proposal. So at the entry point, many folks would be confused that, hey, where do I put this proposal? Does it say I have to enhance fetch? Okay, does the fetch API go to W3C or is it TC39? Like, so many folks get confused at the entry point itself on which working group or standard committee that they need to express their thoughts and opinions towards.
I would love to have a website for people like that we maintained as the standards WG, like and maybe it's linked off the openjs.org site, which we're doing something like that for JSlandia. So it feels like just kind of wash, rinse, repeat the template, and bada bing, bada boom, we've got a website that we can add to. That I think would be a nice, like, easy way to get started if we have things that we want to share. I don't know. Other thoughts though? Mike, Samuel, Richard, Mike Champ. other folks with opinions?
I like the idea. Let's see. Yeah, just a lot of work to, to chase this stuff down and curate it.
I guess the question is like, how much do we need to, do we need to like contextualize it all, or can we just say, here is a list roughly categorized, if you're looking for information on this, try these links, and that's how we get started. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you don't let, like I say, don't let perfect get in the way of good, and start with something, start with something. But I think the most important thing is, you're right, to curate it so it's simplified a little bit, and then open to have contributions from outside this group as well. So
It'd be probably useful to think about what problem it solves, or what the user avatar is, or what the user story is. All this stuff we used to talk about at Microsoft, Robin? Just so we have a fairly concrete idea of who the target audience for this is, so it doesn't just get overwhelming.
I wonder whether, I know Joe has organized an awful lot of office hour kinds of things. And I wonder whether using this, kind of having a feedback loop between some kind of office hours where we, some people answer standard related questions, and we use that to update kind of, these explanatory things, and maybe they also channel people who have further questions to the office hours. I wonder whether that would be worthwhile.
Like the idea of the feedback loop, and capturing information that gets generated, from real questions by real people.
And I think Joe, your goal was also to help diversify our participants too. And maybe we partner with a university or something like that to bring in, a pipeline, just like sort of the Chaos Project did at the Linux Foundation by partnering with the university on diversity research. That maybe we do the same thing in the standard space, right?
Yeah, that sounds great. The challenge I was running into was just getting enough interested parties on the call to really kind of dig into things. But I think if we did partner with someone or did more outreach and promotion, then that could work.
If we're having trouble getting people on the line from the answering question side, fielding questions, I'm happy to, kind of set aside some time to help with that.
Maybe we start with an AMA. Sorry, Reddit, a question session, whatever we call it.
A query me this.
I like that.
So we can't use AMA because it's trademarked by Reddit, in case in case you ever thought you might want to use that phrase.
But we have been doing those, and they actually have been quite popular, often not always in exact real time, but we kind of timestamp them and do blogs on them, and we do get a lot of interest, for sure.
Also, I'm part of this developer.
Trademarked is a useful fact to disseminate.
So I'm part of the developer students commit club in like that Google is running. So there are a lot of folks, if you're looking for creating a pipeline from universities and students alike, we can get connected there with the DSE. So that's a pretty huge effort from Google in terms of bridging the gap between like developers and students. And something that just echoed in my mind was haven't really seen the Google Summer of Code having a category for standards per se, because the focus is always, there are a lot of free and open source softwares, but the focus is more on how you go and write code or make the piece of application better, but not really in terms of standard. So we could try to get in a segment for standards per se, and try to see how we could folks could ideate and contribute. It need not be just enhancing the spec or likes. It could also be just like improving the standard body's website and making it better, adding more content, adding more visualizations and likes too.
That is a fantastic idea.
Yeah, and OpenJS, Brian, who's our program director, has been working with the Google Summer of Code on that program. So that is a fantastic idea. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So not sure, we got, so I'm not sure what, like, how to turn this conversation into like, what's the next small step. As y'all were sharing things, I was popping them into the issue so we can keep track of stuff. But I think it sounds like one next small step might be to set up like the office hours-ish with Joe, that like Joe had. And to like Mike Samuel's point, we can invite Mike, we can invite Professor Andrew, what the heck is his last name? So there's a professor who I'm Twitter friends with, who does a lot of research in standards, and like he would be great, like, so we could maybe do these, but then invite some guests or something, invite guests from IETF or wherever. That'd be good.
Emily had a nice idea as well on chat. Yeah.
Yes.
All kinds of things. Yeah.
We have known. Yeah. That's a good point. And that feels very much connected with the discussion thing, and with the discussion strategy too, which we haven't got to, and we're basically almost out of time for today. So Emily, can I put this on our agenda for next time?
Absolutely.
Cool.
I love that too. Think about the work on the semantic interoperability and a lot of policy issues. I love that.
Actually quickly save chat because there's so many good links in here.
Exactly. I was just thinking the same thing.
So that's that. And then I think we should keep, to Mike Champion's point, thinking about like the use case for a website that displays this this content that we're sharing. Cool. Well, let's keep thinking about it, because I think there's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of good, there's good material. There's so much good material. And just like, if there's a way we can help make it make sense for more people, I think that's just, All right. I did want to, because I realized in the notes stack, there's a missing issue that I had tagged. And that is the recurring meeting time conflict that we periodically have because of the CPC working group. I think we can solve that by, let me go double click into this link here, because I think there was a good proposal. Yeah, either have the meeting 2 hours earlier on conflicting days, which sometimes airs with Jordan, but or also just shifting it a week, and I think that would possibly solve our problem as well.
I think if you shift it a week, it still ends up running into trouble every fourth week or something. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure, but I was thinking about it this morning, and I think that might be the case.
What's the air night? Because the 9 a.m. and 7 a.m. for Pacific, or? for 2
Yeah, it's
hours?
because the CPC meeting does 2 in a row at one time and then 2 in a row at the next time. So at some point, it's gonna, I think every 4 weeks, it's gonna bump into one of those meetings. The alternative is to just move it, an hour earlier or an hour later.
I'd be fine to move it an hour earlier. I don't think that would interfere with any ongoing meetings. Emily, would that work for you?
Earlier would work.
I figured. Just, so any qualms with that? I would imagine that would be better for the West Coasters too, but not sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm looking at my schedule. I don't have anything at 1 o'clock, for that time slot for me. So it works great for me.
I don't either, and I've always had our CPC meetings and then like this gap, and so it's fine for me to like.
Which is nice for a lunch, but
Or we just eat on the call and shove our faces.
Yeah,
People want to see that.
yeah, it's the best.
Okay, well, I'll send a poll in Slack because that seems to be the place where most people are likely to see it, and just say, hey, if we did it 1 hour earlier, would that cause great difficulty for anyone?
Of course, I'd recommend opening an issue just so that it's there. In addition to the poll, doodle, whatever.
Cool.
I mean, a doodle's probably overkill, but yeah, the question and an issue would be good. I have another thought if I can move on to it. A question of sorts. I was wondering if this standards group and the work that we're doing should be a collab space in a way to kind of promote the idea of collab spaces and kind of make it. I feel like collab spaces are more oriented towards outside people getting more involved too, and I think that we have brought more folks involved into the standard space, and it seems like it feels more like a collab space in some ways. I don't mean to be like semantic, but my thinking is that if we promote it as a collab space, then it's another cool collab space that we have at the OpenJS org. Just an idea. I was thinking about it earlier.
I think it's a good idea. I think maybe some of our like programs that we like, for example, discussion spaces and that kind of stuff could be instances of collab spaces. One challenge is that with the standards working group, we are like chartered by the CPC and delegated for decision-making purposes in a way that we do not do with collab spaces. So I can see that being a little weird from like but it's worth chewing. Like, I think we should kick on that a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I run the CPC, so I can just change that at any point. I'm just kidding.
Jeez, whoa.
Is that how it works?
Oh, I forgot Emily was on here. Never mind. Sorry.
Wow, power tripping.
Motherhood and apple pie.
Yeah. Kidding, of course.
Actually, Emily runs the CPC. Just kidding.
So true.
Cool. All right. Well, I've got some stuff to follow up with in our issues. We will take up some of the proposal discussion related topics that Emily and Hemanth brought up today in our next call. And we'll keep, we've got the draft that we'll be collaborating on, update to the time, and then looking at days/options for office hours, query me this, AMA, whatever the long acronym that Mike provided in chat is. And I think we've got lots of good stuff. So thanks everyone for a super productive meeting.
Super productive. It flew by. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It sure does.
About standards.
Standards, I know. It's fun. That's one of our key principles, right?
Yeah, and my mission is like make it cool. Like we're gonna make it really cool.
It's always been cool.
It's always been cool. Okay, well I'll just go tell my husband that who is not agree.